Alright. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Hope y'all having a great day. And I am officially back with weekly videos now, starting this week, all throughout the season for both college football and the NFL. So hope you guys are along for the ride. I know I didn't make many videos the last couple of months, but there hasn't been much to be talking about, throughout May, June, and early July to where there's not much to talk about, but the season is right around the corner. College football season starts the 29th. NFL preseason starts next week. So we're finally getting live games to be able to watch and finally getting to see these teams play. So with no further ado, let's get into my college football season predictions, starting with the Big Ten, which I think is the best conference. You guys can let me know down in the comments what you think the best conference is, and if you guys want me to make a video telling you why I think the Big Ten is the best conference. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting off with week zero. There's only one week zero Big Ten game, and that's San Jose State going to USC. It's pretty crazy that USC is in the Big Ten because the Big Ten is like a Midwestern conference, like from like Iowa to like Ohio. Like it's very much in that Midwestern. So still having these California teams isn't, fully setting in, but obviously USC is going to win this game. They're going to be a big favorite, and there's not really much to talk about. Like some of these games I'll go more in depth in just because they'll be bigger matchups, but a lot of these games I'll just be quickly going through. So moving on to week one, which has a lot of games. I'm gonna go through most of these pretty good. Like Minnesota's gonna beat Eastern Illinois. Rutgers is gonna beat UMass. That's pretty standard. I do think Ohio could give Nebraska a scare, but I think Nebraska wins. Penn State beats Marshall. Um, this game, Northwestern's South Dakota State, I think will be good, but I think Northwestern gets the win. Michigan over Western Michigan. Ohio State over Ball State. USC over another California school, Fresno State. Um, Illinois over UAB. Iowa over Northern Illinois. Michigan State could be tested against Toledo, but I got the Spartans winning. Purdue over Indiana State. Maryland over Howard. Indiana over North Texas. Yeah, that's North Texas. Um, Leaving us with a couple games that I think I'll go more in depth in just because I feel like they're bigger matchups. Starting with an old Pac 12 rivalry, UCLA, Cal, two teams that very much think they can be contenders. Well, maybe not contenders for UCLA, but competitive with new head coaches. Um, Cal with Tosh Lupoi, and they kept JKS. Um, and have a loaded talent. And then UCLA with Bob Chesney bringing all of his JMU guys in, along with other power conference players. Maybe Nico Iamaleava can have a bounce back year after what was a rough season for UCLA. But I'm gonna go Cal. I just think they're the better team. And as much as UCLA did improve, and I do think they'll be better this year, I'm just not ready to fully buy into the Bruins until like I see that like they can sustain success and not have like a couple years where they're good. Moving on to the Oregon Boise State game. Remember a couple of years ago, the year Boise State made the playoffs, they gave Oregon a scare. I mean, it was a close game. So I did think Boise State Oregon is definitely going to be a good game, but I just think Oregon brings back a lot of players that could have been first round picks this past year. So they're loaded with veteran talent on this team, and Boise State will be a contender in the Pac-12. More than likely, will be. It seems like people think they'll win the new Pac-12, but I do think Oregon at home with a veteran roster trying to finally get over that hump that they've haven't been able for the last couple of years under Dan Lanning. I think this could possibly be the year. Moving on to the Apple Cup, Washington State. The final game, at least for the foreseeable future, unless like they renew the rivalry um, in a couple seasons. But right now, the last Apple Cup for a while. Washington State, new head coach, but will be competitive in this game. It's obviously a rivalry game, so both teams are going to be um, fighting. But I think Washington does get the win and starts 1-0. And finally, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, a neutral site game at Lambeau, which is kind of cool. Wisconsin coming off a really disappointing season, their first non-bowl appearance in like a while, taking on Notre Dame, who believes that they are the team to beat this year. They think that this year they can go on a run. So, and this is one of a couple games in week one where it's like, because there's been a trend since 2021 where a top 10 team loses. So Notre Dame more than likely will be in the top 10. Wisconsin more than likely going to be unranked. We could see the Badgers pulling off this upset and, because Notre Dame has started off slow the last couple of years under Marcus Freeman, but I think they get the win. I think Wisconsin will keep it close with a much improved roster, but I just think Notre Dame knowing, like wanting to prove everybody wrong that they deserve to be in the playoff. I think they get the win. Moving on to week two, got some more profile games, but still some games that won't be really close, like Indiana over Howard, Washington over Utah State. Even though I think the Aggies will be competitive, Wisconsin over Western Illinois. Penn State going to Temple could be an interesting game, um, but I just don't think Temple can really compete at all with Penn State. USC starting 3-0, beating Louisiana. Nebraska against another MAC team in Bowling Green. That should be interesting. Um, sorry. Um, let's see. Maryland, I think beats UConn. I think UConn is a very good team as an independent. Outside of Notre Dame, nobody really talks about UConn as the other independent because they're not really nationally known as a football school, but they do tend to play teams, especially power conference teams, at home really well. Like they beat Duke last year, but I think Maryland gets the win. San Diego State, UCLA should be a good game. Two California schools. Definitely, I think will be an interesting matchup. But I think the Bruins get the win. Michigan State beats Eastern Michigan, and not talking about these power conference matchups, which we have a lot of in week two for the Big Ten. Starting off, Rutgers, Boston College, a Big East rivalry returning. Um, no, actually no, because BC left the Big East before Rutgers joined, so there really isn't much history between these two schools. BC doesn't look like they're going to be very good this year. Like they think they might be like one of the worst power conference schools this year. Rutgers, hopefully, will be better on the defensive side to where they can be more competitive, winning more Big Ten games. It is, BC is home, so this could be Boston College like a couple of years ago where they beat Florida State, but I'm gonna go with Rutgers. Wake Forest at Purdue, another ACC Big Ten game. Um, so that'll be interesting. I think Wake Forest did surprise a lot of people last year, winning a lot of close games and finishing I think 9-4. I want to say, which was a really good year. Purdue, this could be a huge win for the Boilermakers, who are trying to get back to at least having like being a competitive team. And I could see Purdue winning this game, but I'm gonna go Wake Forest, just the better school in football right now, and I think definitely could um, be a good game. Next up, we got a couple SEC Big Ten games. Starting with Mississippi State, Minnesota. Two schools that I feel like are very similar. Like they're not really nationally known as football schools, but very much have, brought in a lot of talent, are very competitive. So this could be a really good game. I mean, Mississippi State last year pulled off that huge upset. Well, not huge, but it was a pretty big upset against Arizona State that kind of put them, back into, a at least like a competitive team after a 2024 season where they were not very good, but Minnesota always consistent, always good, and I'm gonna say the what are they on? The Minnesota Golden, I forget. Yeah, moving on. Oklahoma, Michigan, renewing that game from last year, which was a classic, which Oklahoma won. I think Michigan gets the revenge, gets the win this year. Even though new head coach with Kyle Whittingham, what does that offense look like? What does the defense look like with new DC? Jay, I forget his last name from BYU. They took him away. But I think Michigan at home in Ann Arbor, they got a huge win against Oklahoma. And this whole Big Ten SEC debate, continues to swirl when these two conferences play, which, I've been saying for a while that I feel like, everybody debates on what's the better conference. Well, why don't you have, your teams play each other? Like have Big Ten and SEC games, like non-conference games, every season between like your top programs to see which conference is better. Like you don't see many of these um SEC teams playing Big Ten opponents. They're usually trying to play ACC or Big 12 teams as that other um, non-conference power conference game. So maybe if they played more, we could end this debate of what's the better conference when you have the two programs that are similar to each other playing each other. Moving on to Duke, Illinois. I remember last year I thought Duke was going to pull off that upset. I was really high on the Blue Devils. They did make the ACC championship game, but they weren't as good as I thought they were going to be. Illinois, though, did lose a lot of veteran talent to the draft and definitely um, in sort of a retooling phase where like they're bringing a lot of younger guys to see if this team can continue to be um, very good. And Duke loses a lot of loses Darian Mensah, loses Cooper Barkey, lost a lot of their defensive talent, even though the defense wasn't that great. So I'm gonna go with Illinois to sweep the series against Duke after going to Duke last year and winning it. Went out to Oregon, Oklahoma State, which hopefully will be a better game this year than it was last year. That was a blowout, 69-3 dominant win for Oregon. Oklahoma State, new coach, Eric Morris, Drew Mestemaker, and all of North Texas coming. So hopefully we'll be better. Oregon, trying to, like I said earlier, trying to get their first national championship. Do have, two really hard non-conference games with Boise State and then Oklahoma State. Two schools that aren't great, but they are going to test you. But I do think the Ducks get the win. Iowa State, Iowa, the one of the only non-conference, one of the few non-conference rivalries that has stayed a annual non-conference game because a lot of them kind of go away after a couple years. But this Clemson, South Carolina, Florida, Florida State, Georgia, Georgia Tech, those rivalries, I feel like are just great rivalries that have stayed the test of time despite all this conference realignment and all teams trying to have easy non-conference schedules so they can make it to the playoffs. I'm gonna say Iowa. I think finally get a win back in the series after Iowa State has won a couple in a row, but new head coach and um what's the word, like new head coach for Iowa State. Um, a lot of new players on that team that Jimmy Rogers brought over from Washington State that definitely will have this team early on, not look like the Matt Campbell team we've been used to. And I think Iowa at home can finally get that win. And then finally, Ohio State, Texas. Can the Buckeyes make it 2-0? Can Texas get their revenge? I do think Texas gets the win here. I just think home and home series, it's hard to win back to back. And I think Texas, remembering last year where they were the number one team, where everybody was hyping them up, and they went to Columbus and lost. I think a lot of people are going to be hyping up Ohio State. Jeremiah Smith, you know, everybody's talking about him, rightfully so. Breaking all the wide receiver records. Ohio State bringing in Arthur Smith as their OC. Will that gel with this team? And I think an early non-conference game against a power conference team could lead to Texas, with also a lot of new pieces, winning this game and evening out the two from last year. Moving on to week 3, still a lot of games that don't really need to be talked about, like Iowa over Northern Iowa, Portland State, Penn State over Buffalo, Illinois over, I bet, Southern Illinois, Washington over Eastern Washington. I mean, North Dakota is a good FCS program, but Nebraska should win that game. Michigan should beat UTEP. Indiana should beat Western Kentucky. Eastern Michigan could give Wisconsin, I feel like, a close call, but I was going to say Wisconsin wins. Minnesota over Akron and Ohio State over Kent State. Not much to talk about. Those should be pretty easy wins for most of those teams. So, first Big Ten game, USC Rutgers, which it's crazy to say that those two teams will be playing conference games. But USC, everybody's hyping them up this year. Everybody's saying, hey, this team, this is the year Lincoln Riley finally put it all together because he's got a veteran quarterback in Jaden Mayava. So the offense should be humming despite losing some talent on the offense to the draft. The defense did lose D'Anton Lynn to Penn State, but the defense should still be really good. Taking on a Rutgers team that, not many people think is very good, and probably, you know, probably a lot of people think that Rutgers, they're decent but not great, and a battle of currently undefeated teams, if that's how it would play out. I think USC on the road does get the win, although I could see Rutgers, because, like, there was a couple of years ago when they went to play Maryland, not very good Maryland team, and they lost that game. But I feel like the veteran talent, along with, the veteran talent, along with the fact that USC, like, it finally feels like it's their year to break through and make it the playoffs, which they've been wanting to do since they've hired Lincoln Riley back in 2022. So it's definitely been a while, and I think USC finally breaks through and gets that win. Michigan State, Notre Dame. Sorry, Spartans. No, it's a renewal of a rivalry, but Notre Dame against the Spartans, I don't see them winning that. Maryland, Virginia Tech, and ACC renewal of a rivalry. James Franklin, knows Maryland well from his Penn State days. Will he be able to come to College Park and get the win? I could see Virginia Tech pulling off the win. I'm kind of debated because, like, Maryland at home against a Virginia Tech team that definitely is going to be, what's the word? Is definitely going to, I feel like, going to be needing to, like, iron out things. Like, I feel like the first couple of weeks Virginia Tech is going to have to, like, um, what's the word? Like, they're gonna have to, like, figure things out on both sides of the ball. So where I could see Maryland with a lot of returning production and a lot of young talent um, that they've gotten in recent years, they could pull off the win. But I'm going to say the Hokies beat Maryland and yeah, a huge non-conference game there. Moving on to Colorado Northwestern, which is a very weird game. Like I feel like nobody thought these two teams would play each other. Northwestern exceeded expectations last year under David Braun, where I don't think many people thought they were going to be that good to where like they would make a bowl game. Colorado dumpster fire year last year. They bring in a lot of talent like Dion does through the transfer portal. Don't know how sustainable it is, and I think Northwestern gets a win. Should be 3-0, right? Unless they didn't play in week 2, so all right, they have a bye in week 2, which is crazy because like then they have to play 11 consecutive games after that South Dakota State game. But finally, Purdue and UCLA, two teams that aren't very good, who in this prediction would both have a loss in before entering conference play. But I'm gonna go UCLA. I think the better team, and I'm not very high on Purdue this year, so I think UCLA at home can get a huge early Big Ten conference win. Moving on to what is finally, a it's finally a huge week where most teams are playing conference games outside of Rutgers, who will beat Howard um, to move to 3-1. But Notre Dame should beat Purdue. Sorry, Boilermakers, but you know they are home, so maybe Purdue could give them a scare, but I don't think so. Northwestern Indiana definitely could be a good game, but the Hoosiers, I'm surprised a lot of people are down on Indiana. Like I know they lost a lot of talent, and a lot of people are like, "Oh, can they continue to do it?" But like they keep both their coordinators. They talent wise are better than they have been the last 2 seasons under Signetti. So until Indiana, you know, isn't as dominant as they've been in Kirk Signetti's first 2 years, I'm not going to bet against them. But on to Nebraska, Michigan State, an interesting game. Nebraska is 3-0. Michigan State's 2-1. I feel like an interesting matchup. Like two teams that like very much are trying to, compete at the top of the level, but just haven't really been able to do it. Michigan State brings in Pat Fitzgerald, used to be at Northwestern. Wasn't really high on the hiring, but maybe at home they could get the win. But I'm going to say Nebraska moves to 4-0. And yeah, moving on, Oregon, USC, a huge matchup. USC for years was, the West Coast like top football school. And then they started to decline, and here comes Oregon. Um, under Chip Kelly, now under Dan Lanning, they've kind of, become the top school on the West Coast. So this is a huge matchup. Like, does Oregon stamp their flag saying we're, still the best school on the West Coast, or does USC, everybody says this is the best shot for the Trojans to, the best shot for the Trojans to make it to the playoffs? Do they finally get a huge upset victory? I'm gonna say no. I'm just not ready to fully buy in to USC just because, no offense, but it's just, it seems like every year against Lincoln Riley, they always have the hype around them, and then they lose games that like they could have won, but they don't. So I'm gonna say um the Ducks stay control and give USC their first loss. Wisconsin, Penn State. I say Penn State. Even in Wisconsin, I think will be better this year. I just don't think even with Matt Campbell, new staff, new players, like they all came mostly from Iowa State. I do think that they're gonna have to gel, together. And this is the Big Ten, not the Big 12, so I do think it definitely could be a learning curve. But I think at home they get the win. Michigan, Iowa, two 3-0 programs if my predictions are right. I've got the Wolverines at home taking care of business. Maryland, UCLA, two teams that very much are kind of in a similar tier where it's like they're schools that are mainly known for basketball that are trying to, you know, trying to get their football program to be better. So I think both teams, in a similar tier where it's like they definitely could, um, be a team that like this year breaks out. I'm gonna say the Terps at home get their first Big Ten win. Illinois, Ohio State, gotta go Buckeyes. And then Minnesota, Washington, two teams I feel like are kind of also in a similar tier where it's like they both are really talented, but I feel like have, you know, similar years where it's like they have the talent, but they just can't really figure it out in the Big Ten with like how many teams they're all. But I'm gonna say Washington at home gets the win. I'm gonna 4-0. Went on to week 5, fully in the conference play. Penn State, Northwestern. Remember last year, this was the game that basically ended the James Franklin era at Penn State when everything that went wrong could go wrong. Northwestern pulled off the upset. So does Penn State get revenge, or does Northwestern, um, come out of nowhere and get a huge win? I mean, I could see Northwestern pulling off a win, but I'm gonna say the Nittany Lions stay unbeaten. Ohio State, Iowa. Sorry about that. Um, battle of two Big Ten teams that have been there forever. Iowa, consistently good on defense, not really the greatest on offense. Taking on Ohio State that definitely believes they can get back to the national championship. I'm gonna say the Buckeyes win in what would be a battle of 3-1 teams. So whoever would lose this game would, have their second loss, either Ohio State's first in conference or Iowa's or second in conference. Went on to Purdue, Illinois. Illinois and Purdue have traded blows. Like last year's game was insane. I think Purdue like barely lost like 50-49. So they come to play, but I'm gonna say Illinois at home against a not very talented team. I feel like they get the um win. Went on Maryland, Nebraska. Two teams, very interesting. Nebraska's trying to get back to the level of success they once had when they were in the Big 8, Big 12. Maryland trying to emerge as a team to watch out for. Both teams I have at 1-0 in conference play. And so, yeah, I'm going to say Maryland pulls off the upset, which might seem crazy, going to Lincoln. It's a very good Nebraska team that always has, great attendance, but I feel like Maryland could pull off the upset. Like we saw them last year go to Camp Randall, play Wisconsin, and I know Wisconsin wasn't that good, but they went to Wisconsin and pulled off a huge win. And then the next three games against Washington, Nebraska, and then UCLA, it was all one score losses. So Maryland definitely can go on the road and beat some of these teams, and I think they could do it. Michigan, Minnesota, battle of a rivalry, as a lot of these, Big Ten games are. I'm gonna say Michigan stays unbeaten, moving to 5-0. Indiana, Rutgers, the Hoosiers. Could this be a letdown spot like it was against Penn State last year? I don't think so. I think Indiana stays on top. Washington, USC, a Pac-12 rematch. Um, USC 4-1, right? Yeah, 4-1. Washington, 4-0. I'm gonna say USC at home pulls off a huge, well, not a huge upset, but a huge win, knocking off Washington, and then Michigan State, Wisconsin. Two teams I have at 2-2 right now. Both have lost. Um, both lost conference games, so the loser of this definitely would be putting themselves in a hole. And I'm just higher on Wisconsin, so I'm gonna say the Badgers get a huge win early in the season and maybe could keep them in this Big Ten conversation. Moving on to week, what is this, week 6. Wow. Gonna just skip over the Northwestern game. They're gonna win that. Illinois, Michigan State definitely could be an interesting game. Two teams from the original Big Ten. Definitely, yeah, got some heated blood. Illinois 4-1. Michigan State down here at 2-3. And you know what? I'm gonna see the Spartans pull off the upset. At home, Illinois. Yeah, I said they have a lot of young talent um on that roster. And I feel like Michigan State, while not that high on the team, I feel like they definitely can pull off an upset like that and knock Illinois down to their second conference loss. USC, Penn State. Remember that game a couple of years ago when USC first joined the Big Ten and out in the Coliseum where it was a duel. Drew Aller and Miller Moss dialing back and forth. This time it's you know it's at Penn State. Could the Nittany Lions? Well, I have them starting 5-0. Could this be a huge Matt Campbell win where he's like, "Hey, I can contend in this Big Ten"? I think it could be, but I'm gonna say the Trojans get this win, move to 6-1, 3-1 conference play, and now we're down to who five teams who have not lost a conference game. Minnesota, Purdue definitely could be a huge matchup, battle of teams. I right now have not won a conference game, and I'm gonna say Purdue gets the win, which I know seems a little crazy, but this team I definitely think is better than the last 2 years, and I feel like a Minnesota team that seems to always lose like these like weird games where it's like they definitely are better talent wise, but they always seem to play down to that competition. Moving on, Iowa, Washington. And I have Iowa 0-2 conference play. Washington, meanwhile, 4-1. Definitely, riding high. But I'm gonna say Iowa pulls off the win in in Seattle against Washington. Definitely could be a Washington win, but I feel like Iowa, scrappy team because who they can go. Like, remember when they played USC last year? That was a close game where they almost won that game. I feel like they could go up to Washington, go up to Seattle, and win that game. UCLA, Oregon, Pac-12 rematch once again. There's a lot of Pac-12 rematches because all these teams play each other. So I'm gonna say the Ducks. I do think UCLA is better, but Just don't think they're anywhere close to Oregon. Indiana, I take care of business against Nebraska, and as much as a Maryland fan I am, you know, I gotta say Ohio State will beat the Terps. Sorry, Maryland, but they're just not that close. And the Buckeyes move now apparently to first place, tied with Indiana for the best record in the Big Ten. But on to week 7, Rutgers, Maryland, two teams also in a similar tier where it's like they're not that great, but definitely could be very sneaky. And I'm gonna say the Terps get the win. Actually, I'm gonna say Rutgers on the road gets the win. Driving Maryland to 2-2 in conference play. I think these teams definitely are similar, and I think Rutgers definitely could get a huge win like that. Nebraska, Oregon, the Ducks 5-0. Nebraska 4-2. So could this be a spot where the Cornhuskers, kind of like last year when Indiana went into Eugene and pulled off the upset, but I'm gonna say the Ducks get the win. Washington, Purdue. Could the Boilermakers make it 2 in a row with wins? I'm gonna say no. I think Washington gets the win and gets back to um, winning. Indiana, Ohio State rematch of the Big Ten championship game. Both teams unbeaten in conference play, so whoever loses this game definitely could, um, definitely, definitely will take a step back. And I'm gonna say Indiana. I think they get revenge for a couple of years ago when both teams were unbeaten late into the season and Ohio State dominated them. And everybody was like, okay, Indiana is good, but not that good. I think they get their revenge against the Buckeyes and knock them off. Wisconsin, UCLA, two teams in a similar tier. I'm going to say the Bruins get their second conference win. Nebraska, Nebraska, um, Michigan State, sorry. Nebraska, Michigan State, two teams, very similar. Pat Fitzgerald going up against his former team. I'm going to say Northwestern gets the win against their old coach. And then Penn State, Michigan. These were always classic games when the two played when they were part of the Big Ten East. Penn State could never get those huge wins against Michigan. And I'm going to say sorry, but it's going to continue for Penn State. Michigan stays unbeaten and drops Penn State to 5-2. Moving on to week 8. As we're on the second half of the season. Indiana, Michigan, huge matchup. Both teams are unbeaten. And I know Indiana's never won in Ann Arbor, but I just can't seem like I just don't want to pick against them because like last year when I did my Big Ten predictions, which if you guys want to go check out to see how I thought the 2025 season was going to look, you can. I thought Indiana was gonna regress. Instead, they were better. I feel like with better talent, with the coordinator staying, I feel like Indiana could be even better this year. And I think, well, this is a huge test. Ohio State, then Michigan, especially going to Ann Arbor. I think the Hoosiers are ready for it, and they get a huge win. Iowa, Minnesota. I'm gonna go with yeah, I'm gonna say Minnesota gets the win. Crucial swing game in the Big Ten, which means every Big Ten team has one conference win so far. USC, I think, beats Wisconsin. UCLA, I'm gonna have beat Michigan State just because I'm not really high on Michigan State. Like I had them beating what was it, Nebraska, maybe, but I'm not really high on the Spartans, and I'm a little higher on UCLA, who I now I'm at 4-3. Rutgers, Northwestern, two teams in a kind of similar tier, which I've been saying for a while, but I'm gonna say Northwestern gets the win, and then Oregon stays unbeaten, moving to 7-0, and drops Illinois to 4-3. As you look at these standings, it's pretty, I feel like, close. Like you have two unbeaten teams in Indiana, Oregon, which I don't think play each other this year. USC, Michigan, and Ohio State at one loss, and then you got like a bunch of teams at 2 and 3 losses. So I definitely think the Big Ten will be competitive this year, which I feel like nobody thinks. They're like, oh, the big teams will just always win, but I feel like there's a lot of teams in the Big Ten that like aren't very good that I feel like definitely could compete this upcoming season. But on to week 9, Minnesota, Indiana. I mean, if I think Indiana is going to beat Ohio State and Michigan, of course I think they're going to beat Minnesota. Wisconsin, Iowa. Huge matchup there, but I think the Hawkeyes win. Northwestern, Oregon. Oregon last year played Northwestern. And I think it was a pretty close game, but I think the Ducks stay unbeaten. Michigan, Rutgers, 6-1 against 4-3. Could this be a huge upset? Could Michigan fall? Kyle Whittingham, first year coach. Could he fall? It could. It is possible, but I think the Wolverines stay with that win. Penn State, I'm sorry, is going to beat Purdue, who's 2-6, but thanks to their win against Minnesota, bumps them up a little bit more. Washington, Nebraska, two teams who definitely are trying to be in like a tier 3, maybe even that tier 2. And I'm gonna say the Cornhuskers get the win. UCLA, I think, beats Nevada, which would put them at 5-3, which they've already exceeded last year's win total. Illinois, Maryland, two teams at 4-3. I'm gonna say the Terps get this win. As a Maryland fan, hoping for a good season, and I think they can get to a bowl game this year. Then Ohio State, USC, both teams at one loss. Could this be Ohio State's undoing, or could USC once again falter? I'm gonna say this time they get the win, which I know would drop Ohio State to 5-3 and 3-2 in the conference. But I just think USC, like they played both Oregon and Ohio State at home. I feel like they got to win at least one, possibly both of those games. And I think USC 8-1 secure, puts themselves very much in the conversation heading into the last couple of weeks for the Trojans. Went on to week 10. Penn State, Washington. Here, I'm gonna say Washington wins. Like a couple of years ago when Washington went to Penn State, they got destroyed. I think Penn State comes to Washington and they get the revenge. Maryland, Purdue. I'm gonna say the Terps become bowl eligible. Yeah, I'm gonna say Maryland becomes bowl eligible. Nebraska, Illinois. Say Illinois gets the win. UCLA, Minnesota. I'll give Minnesota another win. Don't want to prop up UCLA that much. Oregon, Ohio State. Yeah, I'm going to say Ohio State at home gives Oregon their first loss, which leaves Indiana, who's the only unbeaten team in this conference. I just think, a couple years ago, remember that crazy game, Oregon, Ohio State? Sorry about that, but it was a crazy ending where not a lot of people were happy about it. And I think Ohio State, you know, they lose to USC the prior week. They come back home. They get an Oregon team who's riding high, 8-0, and then they lose to them. Rutgers, Wisconsin. I'm gonna say Wisconsin gets the win. You're trying to keep that hope alive and make it a bowl game. Iowa, Northwestern. I'm gonna say the Hawkeyes on the road get the win, and then Michigan, Michigan State. I've got the Wolverines getting the win, which a three-way tie now, 8-1 between Oregon, USC, and Michigan. Definitely, I think it's crazy. On to week 11. Yeah, week 11. Penn State hosting Minnesota. Sorry. I'm gonna say that Nittany Lions get that win. Washington going to Michigan State could be a trap game that we've seen, but I think Washington will be ready for it. Yeah. Nebraska, Rutgers, two teams very much. I feel like at this point of their season would just be trying to get wins at the end of the year. And I'm going to say Rutgers gets it. Northwestern, Ohio State. Northwestern, could this be an upset? It could, but I'm going to say the Buckeyes move to 7-3. USC, Indiana, undefeated Hoosiers taking on a Trojans team that, you know, isn't trying to lose a second game. They're trying to win, and this would probably put them in the driver's seat to make it to the Big Ten title. But I'm going to say Indiana beats them. Um, Iowa, Purdue. I'm going to say the Hawkeyes get the win. Michigan, Oregon, both teams at 8-1. So this is a huge matchup in determining who would be in the driver's seat to play, more than likely, Indiana in the Big Ten title game. I'm going to say the Ducks get the win, which drops USC and Michigan this week to 2 losses, putting Oregon and Indiana in the driver's seat to secure a win. Illinois, UCLA. I'm going to say the Illini get that win. And then I'm going to say Wisconsin beats Maryland, moving them to 5-5 and giving them a realistic chance to make a bowl game this upcoming season. Week 12, the penultimate week. Wisconsin, Purdue. Hey, I'm gonna say the Badgers get bowl eligible. Sorry, Purdue, but it's just a long season. But they didn't, match their win total from last year at 2 wins, and there are some games I could have switched that potentially could have made them bowl eligible. I mean, not bowl eligible, but a lot better. Penn State, I'm gonna say beats Rutgers. I got the Buckeyes dropping Nebraska to 5-6. Michigan beats UCLA. I got the Trojans over the Terps. Indiana going to Washington. I'm gonna say the Hoosiers stay unbeaten. Oregon, Michigan State. I got the Ducks winning. Northwestern, Minnesota. This was a game last year that Northwestern clinched the bowl game. In this scenario, the winner would get to bowl eligible. And I'm going to say Minnesota gets there. And then Illinois, Iowa. I'm going to say Iowa gets the win, 8-3. Moving us to rivalry week. Rivalry week. The final week of the season. Nebraska, Iowa. I'm going to say the Hawkeyes stay, beating Nebraska, which in this situation would have Nebraska finishing 5-7. We'll see if that turns out to be right. Michigan State, Rutgers. Got Rutgers bowl eligible. USC, UCLA. UCLA trying to get to bowl eligible. The Trojans trying to get a win to finish 10-2 and at least make it to possibly the playoffs. I'm gonna say USC in a rivalry game gets the win. Oregon beats Washington to finish 11-1. Northwestern, Illinois. Northwestern trying to get to bowl eligibility. I'm going to say they do. I'm going to say they beat Illinois. Indiana stays unbeaten. Yes, sorry to anybody who wants me to have Indiana lose a game and not be as good as they are. I think they stay unbeaten. Penn State beats Maryland to finish 9-3 in Matt Campbell's first year, while the Terps finished 6-6 and definitely have an improved season, though did lose their final 3 games of the year. Ohio State beating Michigan to finish 9-3 for both teams. And then Minnesota, Wisconsin. I'm going to say Wisconsin gets the win, finishing 7-5. And well, I get to pick the Big Ten title, which I didn't end up doing last year. I'm just gonna go with Indiana winning the Big Ten. Yes, I have Indiana over Oregon. Yeah, these are my Big Ten predictions. Indiana going unbeaten, although they do have some games where they could lose, like Ohio State, USC, the Michigan game. Those definitely could be losses, but I'm just not going to bet against Kirk Cincinnati. Like last year, I thought they were going to regress. They ended up winning the national championship, and the roster is even better this year. Oregon 11-1. They don't win the Big Ten title, but they will get into the playoffs. USC 10-2. We'll see if that's good enough. Depending on how the rest of my predictions go, we'll see if that's good enough to make the playoffs. Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, and Penn State all finished 9-3. Ohio State finished 7-2 because of the Texas loss. But all really good seasons. Ohio State probably would be disappointed after last year where they only lost 1 game. Or they only lost, they didn't even lose a game in the regular season. They lost to Indiana in the conference championship. Michigan and Penn State. I feel like this would be good seasons for new coaches. And then Iowa, a really good year, 9-3. Wisconsin and Washington going 7-5. I think would be good years. Wisconsin definitely has the talent to finish this good. So, and then Washington, I think it would be a disappointing year going from 8-4 to 7-5. But in a Big Ten where there's 18 teams, it's going to be hard for every team to exceed each year. Maryland, Minnesota, Northwestern, and Illinois going 6-6, and Rutgers, all really good. I think Maryland definitely could hit 7 wins, maybe 8. That might be pushing it, but definitely could. So could Minnesota, Northwestern, Illinois. I feel like it's like the one wild card where it's like they've been really good, really consistent. So like you think they're going to stay consistent, but they don't have a lot of veteran talent on this roster. So I don't want it to overreact and say Northwestern will continue to be good, and then like they have a season where like they step back from being good. Rutgers back to being bowl eligible after a couple of disappointing years. UCLA improvement. I mean, they didn't improve record wise, and I feel like they were better. Just a lot of hard games on that schedule. Nebraska, a lot of hard games on that schedule, and I'm just not really a big Matt Rhule fan. Like last year, I predicted that Nebraska was going to start good and then finish out, mediocre, which is basically what happened. So I feel like this could be a year where they just like implode, and it's a year where this team definitely falls apart. Michigan State, just not very high on them. Like Pat Fitzgerald, I know was good, but at winning a lot of games at Northwestern, but that was pre NIL and pre um 18 team Big Ten. Like he was a part of the Big Ten West where it was a lot easier to win because of the teams they were playing against. So I feel like in a Big Ten where there's no divisions and where he's not going to just be able to like recruit because Like he's not going to be able to just like get those like small gem guys that like will pop. I feel like it's going to be a hard season, and then Purdue, matching their win total from last year, could beat some teams possibly, throughout the rest of the could beat like some teams I have them losing to. But at least getting a conference win, I feel like would be the big winner for Purdue. And yeah, that'll do it um for today's video. Hope you guys like it. Um Hope you guys comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And I will check you guys tomorrow for my SEC season predictions. Hope you guys have a great day and bye.